want to welcome you all to our June 8th City Council work session. Mr. Manager, I believe we have a topic about energy today.
We do. I'm very pleased to have representatives from Dominion to talk to us about it's a transmission line and related infrastructure project, but ultimately it's the supportive infrastructure necessary to accelerate and make possible the coastal wind project. So I know time is short, so I'll turn it over to our friends from Dominion to introduce their team.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me okay? The most common words these days in American business, followed by "you're on mute." But in any event, I want to briefly, my name's Bill Murray, and I've the honor to lead our external affairs team at Dominion. I've got four of my colleagues here. Rob Richardson to my right is a consultant in our transmission group. Behind me, we've got Benita Harris, who is our policy, regional policy manager, director rather, and also does double duty, plays both ways, as her husband would say in football, does double duty doing press relations with us as well. We've also got a legendary pair, Junius Williams and Max Bartholomew, both nominally retired but still working for the company nearly full time. That's our special retirement program we have in Dominion External Affairs. In Max's case, he's working on his 52nd year with the company as of July, coming up on 51 years. Junius is well into his 40s in terms of time with the company. And then next to them is our Vice President of State Affairs and Public Policy, Catherine Bond. So in any event, I want to give just a couple of general project updates, and I'm going to cover three quick slides, focusing on the two that involve Chesapeake. A couple project updates, all primarily related to things that have happened since I was here in February. It seems so long ago. It was only a few months ago, but a lot has happened. So some positive developments from the federal level, one of which is the federal government's Bureau of Offshore Energy Management, which is part of the Department of the Interior, announced a sort of draft review schedule for our project, which is very consistent with our expectation to get this project fully in service by the end of 2026. So that was good news. And in some ways, I was once told sometimes the most challenging part of any permitting process is not the rigor of the process, which I support, but more the timing. And so we were very pleased to see that. It's also worth noting the Biden administration announced there may be additional wind energy areas off the coast of Virginia, and that'd be something we'll look at with great interest, though we are laser focused on this project. And just last week, you may have seen on the AP Wire in West Virginia, where our steel for our offshore wind vessels being manufactured, our CEO, Bob Blue, was with the U.S. Secretary of Energy and West Virginia Senator Manchin at the factory where the actual steel is being milled for the offshore wind vessels. So a couple of brief project updates there. I'll also just make a general energy policy note. Right after I talked with you all in February, we had the Texas tragedy. That's related to a lot of Texas-specific factors. But nonetheless, it was a reminder to all of us of just the importance of what it is that an electric utility does, keeping the lights on, and how critical that is for the functioning of society day to day. So that's something I gather we may see some similar challenges for some similar public policy shortcomings in California this summer with summer reliability. But in any event, I just wanted to assure you that at Dominion, we never lose sight of the importance of reliability. Fortunately, Virginia's got a regulatory regime. We are fully regulated from generation of power, whether it's from offshore wind or a more traditional source like our Surrey nuclear station in this region, right to the distribution line to the home or business. We're fully regulated, one integrated company. So with that, let me first give a brief overview of the transmission project generally. We're at the stage, I'm going to do a couple caveats here. We're at the stage of looking at multiple potential routes. When we file in the fall sometime with the State Corporation Commission, the overall offshore wind project, including the transmission part, will still, and the SEC requires this, and rightly so, you should never give a regulator only one option. We'll have a number of routes that we've identified. We'll have identified at that point a preferred route that'll be guided by the same principles I mentioned to you last time I spoke with you in terms of looking at using existing right-of-way whenever possible and trying to minimize the full range of impacts, whether it's to environmental resources, historic resources, communities, what have you. A couple of things I'll note on this slide. The other thing I should probably mention, and I'll say it again more specifically when we look at the Fentress substation, we're still at the preliminary engineering point where everything's a rectangle or a square. That's not necessarily the way we're going to design the project. So if you may say, well, why don't you take this corner off here? We understand that. We're still at what I'll call the basic shapes phase of illustrating things on maps. And we understand the need to refine that. And I'll point that out when we look at a particular neighborhood near the Fentress substation. So I will just tell you, we're at an initial stage. We've made more progress than we had made last time, but we're still at the stage of showing things from an illustrative standpoint, not sort of blueprints to construct something with. You may ask, looking at the title of this, where in the world is the Harper switching station? It doesn't exist yet. It would be a new switching station. A switching station will look remarkably like a substation. It's the sort of transition point where the line has come ashore. We'd expect the line to come ashore just like our pilot project has at the State Military Reservation, and then probably come above ground at the transition station or switching station. Again, think of it as like a substation right across from Naval Air Station Oceana. So that's what we're calling the Harper switching station. I can tell you from past experience at Dominion, the name it has at the beginning of the project and the name it has at the end of the project, as we've done more research or learn, it may have a slightly different name, but for now we're calling it the Harper switching station. And then it will end up, as I mentioned last time, at the Fentress substation, and that's where it'll interconnect with the rest of our electric grid. Let's look more specifically at Chesapeake. And Rob Richardson is my phone-a-friend option here from our transmission team. As some of you, as I mentioned last time, while I grew up in Virginia Beach, had a great experience in the region, I have noticed a couple of things about the region. One, there's all manner of streets that didn't exist when I was living here last. And we also, and rightly so, we take pride in streets so much here. Sometimes we change the names a few times as we progress. So in any event, this project's going to come into Chesapeake. Once we cross the Intercoastal Waterway, becomes Mount Pleasant Road. So if you see up at the top center of this particular slide, we'll go from North Landing Road, cross the Intercoastal Waterway. The name changes, same road, different name, Mount Pleasant Road there once it gets into Chesapeake. And I'm now going to, in keeping with what I told you earlier about rectangles and squares, and at this point do an approximation, this is about a mile. We're going to come down that road, and then I'm going to use my technical term, we're going to dogleg at that point where we'll have a turn into the Fentress substation. That's about a quarter mile. And again, these are approximate distances. There's, I believe, 6 different route options we're looking at. Significant overlap among several of those options. But in general, this is kind of the rough shape of the project. Fentress, as you know, has been a long-standing substation they have here. I was asked last time, Councilmember Ritter asked if we anticipated expanding it. We've run the numbers, told her we needed to run the numbers. We've run the numbers. The substation, we have a fair amount of property that we hold there currently or own currently. If you look at the white on this slide, that's the approximate footprint. Again, recognizing at this point we're just doing squares. We're not, this is not going to be maybe as linear as it appears, but there would be a significant expansion of the footprint of the substation. To give you a sense of scale, if you look at the most narrow point up in the top right corner of that graphic that shows the substation, where you get the closest to the Etheridge Lakes neighborhood, that's about 60 feet of trees. If you look at it, so about 20 yards, about 60 feet at the most narrow point. And again, that's at the stage of engineering where we're just drawing boxes. So we will certainly work with the neighborhood, work with the community, see if we can do a little better there. But what you would be doing is primarily moving the substation in north. We looked at some other options. If you look up at the top left, you see your existing municipal park in the area. There's some wetlands considerations around the station. So at this stage, the anticipation is the substation would expand to the north. And to give you a sense of the tree cover, again, this is land that we own now. The most narrow point, as shown there, would be about 60 feet. And that's at this stage what we're looking at. And that's, again, assuming you did this literally as a box-type expansion is what you're seeing there. in terms of city approvals that we would need, any of the routes we're showing, and this shouldn't surprise you, will require crossing some city easements. So we'd first need permission to do that, and then we would expect we'd need a conditional use permit, which we would expect to file some part in the time in the first part of 2022. After, I can assure you, extensive work both with the community and with your staff to get that in the best possible posture before we go through the land use approval process. And that is a highlight of sort of how the thinking has evolved as to the Chesapeake portion of the project and the overall project. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. I'll first give Rob a chance to correct any misstatements of fact that I may have made.
Anyone have a question or comments at this point? Did you have any other comments that you'd like to make, Rob?
I do. No, thank you.
Okay.
And Matt, thank you for the professionalism and rigor of your staff. It's always a pleasure to work with your staff. We know them all from other projects. We look forward to working with them on this.
We certainly do appreciate the update. Thank you very much. Mr. Manager, anything else?
That concludes our work session.
Okay, we'll see you all at 6:30.